Ladies and gentlemen of the grimdark future, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to our breakdown of the Dawn of War 4 demo. So recently, PlayOn did send us a demo in which we get to play Space Marines against Orcs with a guest appearance of the Imperial Guard as well as the Necrons. So what we're going to be doing today is breaking down my experiences in this demo, talking about some of the mechanics, how the game works overall compared to the previous Dawn of Wars. I just started playing Dawn of War 1 with the remaster, so I have a little bit of a reference there, but overall just going to break it down. We'll also talk about the units we got to use, some of the abilities, all that neat stuff. So without further ado, let's break it down. One of the coolest things that is in the new Dawn of War game, of course, is the sync kills, and they seem to happen pretty frequently. We are going to be showing some B-roll footage coming up here soon, where you get to see some ongoing battles, and you guys will probably be able to play, a little bit of Where's Waldo and spot those sync kills, but there's quite a few of them in there. But just for a little bit of a sake of ease here, we are going to show you some real quick here. So now that you've seen the sync kills, we are back in action, and I had a lot of fun kind of zooming in and checking those out during our demo playthrough. But the first four starting factions are going to be Necrons, Marines, Orcs, of course, Space Marines, Orcs, and Mechanicus. So Mechanicus is something that I don't think has been heavily represented in previous Dawn of War games. I think they might have been in one of the mods for Dawn of War 1, but aside from like the core factions and even in just, Space Marine and Warhammer 40,000 games in general, they did get their own game relatively recently, Mechanicus, which had a really good soundtrack, but they are going to be in the game here, and you'll be seeing them coming up in some of the B-rolls. So this is very fun. I just really, really hope that I hope we get more factions, and I really, really want to you have to have Chaos. Chaos is like the antithesis of the Space Marines. They're just like one of the big perpetual enemies, the Chaos God. So I really hope we get a Chaos faction and Imperial Guard. Guard are just like the most relatable faction, grounded, but overall, Marines and Orcs are classic. It's always fun to watch them fight. Marines wanting to purge them and the Orcs just being happy to be there. It's a great win for everybody. So I hope we do get those other factions, but that's cool as well. Necrons are always great. I think Necrons add that sense of inevitability and that like slower, grindier play style. Again, I'm just going from how they play in DAO 1 and from what I've seen in other games, but I hope to see that. Mechanicus is a faction I don't know too much about. I, of course, played a lot of Warhammer 8th edition, 9th edition, a little bit of 10th edition as well. I have played against them a couple times, but I'm excited to see them, and I think it's going to be quite a bit of fun. So one thing I want to talk about is like the 40k feel, right? So this is something that, it's insane, right? If you have two identical pieces of Warhammer 40,000 media and you just like slightly alter the sound of those effects, like it's going to drastically change how much people enjoy it. When you see a heavy bolter shooting, you want to hear that thunderous, heavy thudding sound, right? When a drop pod comes down, you want to hear that drop pod just clank into the ground, crushing everything below it with the roaring fire of like a heavy bolter on top of it, right? And as far as the drop pods go, I mean, when you drop those things down and you hear the reverberating bass through your speakers and just the chaos that ensues, it was pretty awesome. And we did get to see that in the demo, of course, and you'll be seeing it in the B-roll footage, which unfortunately doesn't have any sound with it. But regardless, it was pretty great. And the bolter sounded pretty great. I liked that. I enjoyed it. And the overall feel of the game, the carnage, the violence, there's a lot of explosions. And man, so you have army abilities, of course. We'll talk about this a little bit later. But when you call down an orbital strike and those huge beams are just like ripping apart an enemy army, it felt good. So it did pass that check for sure. I liked that. Now, I'd have to scrutinize the bolter sounds a little bit more, but the drop pods and the orbital strike and some of the impact of the vehicle cannons and stuff, it felt pretty good. But really, that's one thing that is so important in 40K, is just having that sound effect, right? So let's talk about the actual mechanics of the game from an RTS perspective. The fights can get pretty damn big, and your armies can get massive. As far as the demo we played in, you had a 300 supply population cap, and I found I was beating a lot of the missions, ending up with like maybe a quarter of the units that you were able to cap out at. So these are going to be, I think, a little bit bigger in scale. Granted, it's not like Dawn of War 1 where you're increasing your, Space Marine size. When you build a squad, they're going to have like 5 dudes in it, right? And you can replenish the individual units like you can in previous games. But so it's going to be a lot of smaller squads moving around. But again, like when you see a regiment of Imperial Guardsmen fighting, they have like a ton of units. Or like Orc Boys are going to be having more, whereas Space Marines are going to be more on the elite side of things. But as far as I can tell, with the population being, 300 is what I think we had in our demo. I don't know if that's going to be what it is for multiplayer. Maybe that's like a campaign thing. But regardless, I was happy to see that. Like, I like the bigger scale fighting. That's why I love Warhammer the Old World, the tabletop game. I prefer more big, massive battles, and skirmishes are fun and all, but I like to see big armies clashing. It's super fun. Now, the ability usage, there's a lot of abilities. Space Marine squads, or Intercessor squads as they're now called. This is like New Hammer. So the entire Space Marine faction is designed on New Hammer, like the Primaris upgrade, right? In previous Dawn of Wars, you had tac squads and you had scouts and different things like that. But now the scout is now the infiltrator and the Intercessor is now the Space Marine squad. So that's going to be reflected. But they all have abilities. Like, so you have jump packs on the Assault Intercessors, which are now your Assault Marines. And you have crack grenades. You have the Mortis Shot. So you start with a named character whose name is Cyrus. And he has a sniper rifle, which can be customized and changed around, whatever. But he has like a Mortis Shot, which is like a one tap ability. So it's not good against hordes, but it's really good at killing elite units. So you would pick that sniper rifle weapon if you're facing maybe more elite compositions. Maybe it's not as good against orcs who present a lot of crappier units, right? You get the idea. But again, later on, it's good when they bring out their elite units. But yeah, overall, the abilities felt pretty responsive. When I was throwing grenades into bricks of units, the targeting system was really smooth. It's a pretty generous system when you move your mouse over the unit. Basically, a big kind of circle comes, you click. You don't need to be super pinpoint with it. They're going to throw it at the squad, and it ties to the squad as well with some abilities, which makes them a little bit easier to kind of work. So that felt good. I think for newer players and veterans, that'll be rewarding. And they felt good and clean. They felt responsive. So overall, I was happy with the ability. Sometimes, like when you go back and play Dow 1, for example, like the abilities are so clunky, and it feels like when you click it, you're like walking through mud. You're like, come on. But these felt pretty good there. So that was good. Now, this is another question some of you may have. Army abilities, as far as what we saw, do exist. Now, in this demo, we only got 3. The Space Marines had a army level up experience thing, which gave veterancy to your Marines and kind of inspired them as their tier 1 ability. Their tier 2 ability was a Valkyrie gunship. So it calls in, or a Thunderhawk gunship, it was one of the two. But it calls in a strafing run, which does do friendly fire damage, so be aware with that. The abilities, I think, do friendly fire, because I was like, oh, it's not going to hurt my own units, but I did it, and it like nuked half my army. So that was their tier 2 ability, and the tier 3 ability was an orbital strike, which is super massive. This thing is insanely powerful. It's gonna punish. Now, as far as I could tell, the abilities built up over time when I was just killing shit. It was pretty straightforward, and I would assume each faction is gonna have different mechanics, right? Maybe the orcs is like, the more you're fighting in melee, and Necrons is based on your power generation or something. I don't know how those work. We only got to play Space Marines, but there is going to be army abilities present, and I assume they're going to be different for each faction. So that makes sense. So the next thing is there is a cover system. So coming from, Dawn of War 2, there is some cover. And in this game, the cover system is very, very, it's pretty simple. You click on the cover and the unit is going to run into the cover. And it's, how in like Company of Heroes 3, for example, or some of the other DAO games, like you put a unit of riflemen in Company of Heroes 3 in cover. And like, if you don't do it exactly perfectly and line up those green dots, some of them will run to the other side of the cover and be like exposed. Well, in this one, it seems pretty well coordinated in that if there's like a rampart, they're going to go jump in it and they're all going to fit behind it and they all get the benefit of cover. So the cover system felt fine. I liked it. It was simplistic, but in a good way. There were bunkers on the map as well, so there were some bunkers that were neutral and contested, which was pretty fun. It seemed like bunkers were very strong against small arms fire, like bolter fire, but when you throw grenades in bunkers, just like in Co, when you're going after buildings and different things like that, it is able to flush them out of the bunker. So I like that system, and it's going to reward some aggressive play. Like if you really want to take certain territory, you can rush the bunker there. I don't know if that's going to be a thing in multiplayer. Again, could just be campaign focused, but I wouldn't hate that, seeing garrisonable buildings in multiplayer. I do hope that that's going to be the case, and I do think that's also going to be a thing based on what I saw. So I like that. I think that's really fun. It's very 40K. I played tons of games of 8th, 9th, and 10th edition 40K, and having buildings and bunkers to run into is very flavorful, very fun, rewards different styles of play. I think it's great. So I do hope that the bunkers and the cover are going to be relatively copious, and a lot of it all over the battlefield there. So as far as the system goes, the resources, we played Space Marines, right? So we had 2 resources there, and I assume it's going to be the same. Maybe there'll be some other ones, like how in Dawn of War 1, like Necrons, for example, they just use energy, right? So requisition's different for them. No idea how that's going to work here. Power is going to be more important for the robot people. Probably so. Who knows? But for the Space Marines, you have the classic system from Dawn of War. You have requisition, and you have power nodes. Requisition points, you take it, and then you can put an upgrade on top of it, which puts like the equivalent of a listening post on top of it, which gives you more resources, makes it a little bit harder for your opponent to flip it. And then the electricity nodes, or the power, you have generators. So you build on it, you take it, and then you add generators up to 3 in total. So there's going to be, the principle of, do I rush this? Do I want to rush this power? How do I want to go about this? Do I want to build 1 generator, go for 3? Obviously, you need power for more advanced stuff like vehicles and whatnot. So yeah, there is the classic requisition and power system. It's going to be very familiar for people who played pretty much all the Dawn of War titles historically. Now, something that's really interesting is we have Dawn of War 1, where you have base building. You can build things out of the map, and you have a classic base infrastructure. And then you have Dawn of War 2, where it's, pretty limited in that regard, mainly just going to be squads and we don't talk about Dawn of War 3 around here. We'll keep moving on from there. But regardless, this has base building. So Space Marines have a very interesting mechanic for base building in which you can drop buildings anywhere on the map. So a Space Marine, let's say you're right at your opponent's doorstep. You can drop a turret, you can drop a barracks, you can drop whatever the hell you want. Space Marines can build anywhere on the map. It comes down from orbit in a giant crate and self-assembles itself, so you don't need builders. I have no idea how the other factions work, but that's how it works for Space Marines. Now, the way that this is balanced is like, how obnoxious would it be if Space Marines could just drop tarantula turrets and bunkers right on your opponent's spawn zone in the early game? Well, the further away from your base you build, your starting main base, the longer it takes to build a building. So you can take that gamble, which I think is kind of an interesting risk reward system of like, okay, hopefully they don't go for this side. Let's say you're trying to analyze the meta. Okay, your opponent's not going to go for this area. Their play style. They like to play this side, whatever. You can maybe try and sneak a turret over there, but it's going to take a long time. And if it backfires on you, they're going to catch it building and they're going to crump it and you're going to have a bad time, right? So that does exist indeed. So we talked about the base building. Takes longer the further away it is away from the main base. The orcs seem to just kind of build shit all over the map. It's just, you'll see in some of the B-roll that's playing in the background right now. Their buildings are all over the place. I don't know how that works, but again, I'm sure we'll find out in the future. So what's cool about Space Marines as well, and Space Marines and drop pods are like, it's oil and water is like the no, they're like the two things that it's like peanut butter and jelly, right? So Space Marines, you can build your units from your main base, or you can build units in reserve and drop pod them in. Now, the drop pods are really cool, and there is an upgrade you can get from one of your tech buildings that makes the drop pods more effective in combat. And this will kind of segue into our next point about how the upgrade system works and how the teching for your various units works. So we're going to get into that in just a moment. But the units, when you build them in reserve, they take a little bit longer to build, if I'm not mistaken, and they also cost a tiny bit more. It's not much, but this gives you a lot of flexibility as Space Marines. Let's say you're doing a big Death Star push and you're worried about being backcapped. Your opponent's going to be coming in with mobile shooting units in one area of the battlefield. Well, you can have some assault intercessors in reserve. You can get the jump packs on them, and you can fly in. And the drop pods are really freaking cool. I think of the entire demo, that's my favorite thing. Like hearing the drop pods, just big erect impact is so good. Now, there's a couple ways to upgrade. This is our next point, okay? Upgrades here for units if you're talking individual unit upgrades, every single unit that I encountered does have some upgrade options. If you are playing an intercessor, you can get stalker bolt rifles, or you can get I forget the name of the other one. I don't play Space Marines in tabletop, but there's 2 bolt rifle options. One of them is better against armor. One of them is better against infantry. With assault intercessors, you can choose a Thunderhammer upgrade and a jump pack. Well, jump pack's ubiquitous for them. Or you can choose to get a hand flamethrower and chain swords, or a power sword. It's one of the options. But basically, one is for anti-heavy and one is for anti-infantry, right? If you're looking at Terminators, you're going to be able to choose a more melee-centric profile to make them aggressive Terminators up close, or you can choose to get an assault cannon. If you're getting the Redemptor Dreadnought, you're able to get a plasma incinerator or a Gatling cannon. They all come with like multiple upgrades. It's very toolboxy, right? Which I love that. I love the tactical flexibility because it opens up builds, right? If you have like just one set of options, at least for Space Marines, I don't know what Necrons will be like, but I think having the diversity of options with Space Marines is going to open up a lot of fun builds and tactics. Now, those upgrades do cost resources. When you upgrade them to like Thunderhammer, it's going to cost money and power potentially. When you upgrade your Dreadnought, your Outriders, which are your motorcycles, it's going to cost resources, right? So that is going to be an investment decision that you will need to make as a player. Now, what the other system of upgrades is, unit upgrades cost resources. Now, if we're looking at upgrades for overall tech, so faction-wide upgrades, right? When you build your first research building, it has a couple upgrade options, but upgrades are free. They don't, at least with Space Marines, they don't have any resource costs. The only cost that the upgrades have is time, and it's a long time. I think it was like 240 seconds, like 3-4 minutes for some of these upgrades. So the decision is, like, for example, in one of the early Space Marine upgrade buildings, I forget which one it is off the top of my head, but basically you have the option for rushing the upgrade that makes your Space Marines capture requisition points and objectives on the map way quicker, or you have the option for upgrading intercessor armor and your infiltrator armor. So you can rush the armor upgrade or the capture upgrade, right? So this is going to determine how you play the game. And that's the same thing for most of your buildings. When you get the more advanced tech, you can choose which tank upgrade you want to get. When you get the upgrades for the drop pods, you're like, oh, do I want to get the machine gun upgrade for the drop pods, or do I want to upgrade their jump packs for these other units, whatever. So unit upgrades cost resources. Tech upgrades, at least for Space Marines, again, everything I'm saying is just Space Marines, it's all we got to play in the demo, are going to be based on just time alone. So that's like your decision. That's like your opening build. So for example, if you're watching another RTS, it's like, oh, they're going to be going for a 3 racks, whatever. In this game, they're going to be like, oh, they're going for an assault intercessor opening with rapid, with thunder hammers to try and bonk down maybe like buildings, whatever. If somebody's making forward buildings and they're going to be rushing the captures. So maybe you have the jump pack intercessors flying around, like capturing objectives really quickly. You're not looking to fight your opponent as much, right? Maybe you're looking to skirmish, play the objectives more. You rush that tech tree. That informs your decision and your strategy. So let's talk about heroes. We got to play with one hero. I assume there's going to be more. Obviously, usually you're going to have a librarian or a psyker type hero. We got to play with Cyrus, who's like kind of an infiltrator, scout, sniper type character. Granted, you can change him. Now, he had several weapon upgrades. We were able to get he starts with a sniper rifle. You can get a plasma gun, and I think he had like a stalker bolt rifle as well. And they unlock different abilities. So if you get the plasma gun, it gives you a generalist, hard-hitting plasma overcharge. If you get the sniper rifle, it gives him a mortar shot, which is like a one tap on an infantry unit and does tons of damage against enemy characters. You can also get the stalker bolt rifle, which has its own unique upgrade. So it's much like DAO 2 in terms of heroes. You have 3 or 4 weapon options depending on what the hero is. And then on top of that, you do also have access to unique hero specialization slots. So you can choose to make him better at different things. And there's 3 or 4 different upgrade options, which is cool. So there's going to be a lot of customization for heroes. Not only do the weapons dictate how they're going to play, but also on top of that, you can upgrade specialization. So these are like hero abilities, kind of like in Warcraft 3, for example. If you're going to be getting, let's say, critical strike for a blade master, he's going to karate chop harder. The same thing for this. There was 3 or 4 different options you could choose from. One of them makes him a better marksman. One of them is better for melee. One of them is better for like utility, espionage, various stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the different heroes, and more so for multiplayer. I'm all about that multiplayer life, man. But yes, the mission we played, by the way, and while we're on the subject of multiplayer, it was just like an annihilation thing. It was basically like, hey, the orcs have a couple bases, destroy them, stop them before they build their super heavy mechs, and just trample you. And again, you'll see some of those mechs playing in the B-roll in the background. But yeah, overall, I wonder how multiplayer is going to be. Is it going to be annihilation? I mean, that works. Or is there going to be objectives like there has been in previous DAO games, where you get various... Because in DAO 1, for example, you have the critical points, and if you have more of those, you can get a take and hold victory, or it's just going to be pure annihilation. I'm really curious to see what the competitive multiplayer is going to be looking like. So that's going to be fun. So yeah, a lot of customization with heroes and units. Like you have a lot of tactical flexibility on how you want to play your units. You can go jump pack Thunderhammer, jump pack Flamethrower. You can go intercessors with various, different types of bolter rifles. The infiltrators, which are your scouts, they have an ability that can give you more command points when they are like remaining stealth, so you can kind of plant them around and get more resources. The eliminators, which are your snipers, have some different type of rounds, which is fun. Yeah, I liked it quite a bit. Now, another thing you're probably wondering about, when your units get in trouble, what happens? Is it like Company of Heroes? Is it like Dawn of War 2, where they retreat back to your base? Yes, it is. So basically, when a unit gets really tattered, you have a couple of options. You can retreat them back to your base by hitting the R button. And much like previous Dawn of War games, the unit is going to get an exclamation point, and it's going to run back to your nearest production building. So if you have a production building built a little bit further forward up, I believe that's where it runs. But regardless, it typically will just run back to your main base, at which point you can recover it and replenish it. Now, this is something that's really, I've heard, this is probably the one thing that I'm a little on the fence about, but I'm curious to see how it plays out. So in Dawn of War 1, you have these big fights ongoing, right? You can replenish units while you're fighting away from your base. So for example, if you have, auto replenish on your cultists, they're going to be healing at a certain rate. It's the same in this. you can replenish your units, at least with Space Marines. I don't know if this is for everybody, anywhere on the map. So you can put on, if you're pushing your opponent's base, you can replenish Space Marines. If they're back in your base, you can replenish them as well. There's a little button where you can reinforce a unit, you click it. So it's very much like Dawn of War 1 in that way, which I know some people like, some people don't like. Curious to see how it's going to play out here. Overall, I didn't mind it. It's a little bit strange for immersion purposes because you just see a guy appear out of thin air. Maybe if there was like a graphic where they come down, like, I don't know, like a parachute or something. But, overall, it's not like a make or break deal for me, but it is something that I'm curious to see how it plays out. Like, is it going to it'll definitely make the battles longer and grindier, just like it does in DAO 1 when you have 2 units pit fighting and they're replenishing, and that's something. So that will be like a micro thing, right? You have a unit getting low. You have to make the decision. Am I going to retreat this unit? Run it back, or am I going to keep it standing and fighting and trying to replenish the units in combat? And sometimes if you replenish units in combat, you're just bleeding manpower, you're bleeding requisition because it's really ineffective. Sometimes it's better to run back and heal. So there is some cool tactical decision making in that regard, but I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. Something I'll be watching with keen interest. So we talked about reinforcing units in the field like DAO 1. There are going to be some, from what I can tell in the B-roll, we did not get to play any, Space Marines don't have like a super heavy, at least in the demo. You have the Dreadnoughts and you have the big Executioner tanks. But in the B-roll footage, which of course we didn't get to try any of the other stuff, we got to see there's an Imperial Knight. I don't know if that's campaign or multiplayer, but maybe Mechanicus can field them. And the Orcs can field the various big Stompa units, so these big scares. And you do fight those in the demo. They're reasonably hard to take down. You definitely need some anti-tank. So, yeah, overall, that's just kind of a breakdown of my first thoughts and opinions on things. Overall, I'm very excited. I'm just happy to get a solid, a potentially solid RTS game. It was very early, in the demo. There was still some placeholders. It was a very early test, so it's really hard to give you like a full like breakdown opinion there. But I had a lot of fun with it. I'm just fiending for the multiplayer. Just give me the the most dangerous game, man. I'm here for the action, but the feel of the mechanics felt good. The explosions, the bolter sounds, the drop pods thundering into the ground felt really, really good. I like the Space Marine base building system. I thought that was cool. I like being able to build chat out on the map. My power fantasy in RTS games is building towers in people's, in front of their bases. And so being able to drop down turrets, like to hold the midfield, it really, for me, feels like the cool Space Marine roleplay where you have some desperate Marines holding against hordes and like, call down the support. Terminators come out of Deep Strike. Drop pod comes down. A turret gets dropped down and starts constructing, like those type of things. I think that's really cool. So for me, I really like that system. Pathing felt pretty clean. The cover system was fine. And yeah, overall, the one thing that I'm curious about is the reinforcing of the field. Like, yeah, we'll see. That always is a little bit immersion breaking for me, but if it's good in a tactical sense in terms of like balance and maybe making the battles a little bit more dynamic, we'll see how it plays out. But overall, pretty excited. And I really want to see the Necron and the Mechanicus units because we've seen Space Marines and Orcs played out like a million times, but obviously the Necrons, when you fight them, I don't think it's in the B-roll footage, but when we fought them, they appear as like a side mission on your campaign on our demo. They do have an obelisk, or the monolith, the big like pyramid, and it does like replenish them and bring them back. And they have those War of the Worlds things that, the ones that hunt down Tom Cruise. They look freaking sweet. And the sound effects for the Necrons were A+. Like when the Necrons attack you, it's straight out of War of the Worlds. Like you're hearing those like reverberating sounds and like the futuristic kind of like bassy like laser sounds. It's really sick. So I'm excited to see them in action as well as the other bad boys. So we can do a quick breakdown of the roster of the Space Marines. I'm sure this is another question you guys have had. This will be really quick. I'm not going to go too much into it, but for those of you guys who are really curious about what's on their roster, we'll break it down. So we had Cyrus, which is the named character. You have Infiltrators, which are your stealth scout equivalents. Intercessors are your baseline Space Marines. Assault Intercessors are your Chainsword, Thunderhammer, Jump Pack boys, and the Jump Packs, of course, are upgrades. Eradicators are anti-vehicle, so Eradicators come in a squad of 3. They're very elite, but very squishy also, because there's only 3 models, but they wreck vehicles. And you have 2 options for them. You can get a Melta, or you can get like more of a Plasma option, if I'm not mistaken. You have Eliminator squads, which are snipers. Blade Guard veterans, which are the very elite, super tanky. You throw these guys in the front line against orcs, hold them in place, and then use your guns to mow shit down. But the Blade Guard veterans, they do, of course, come from, they're very iconic with Ultramarines and whatnot. But yeah, they have the shields, they have the swords. You have Terminators, classic. You can't have a Warhammer game without Terminators. Invictor Warsuits are not the Dreadnoughts. They're a different unit. They're from the recent Space Marine update from a couple years ago, and yeah, they're like a little bit lighter than dreadnoughts and more maneuverable, but a little bit squishier, of course. So those are like the warsuits where the Space Marine is like sitting in his toddler cage. He like looks like a giant toddler sitting in front, and they have like flamethrowers and a lot of cool upgrades. So they're more infantry centric. You have the Redemptor Dreadnought, which is your heavy dreadnought. And one thing that's really cool about Space Marines is you have a Thunderhawk relay station. So this isn't a unit, but it's a building you can build, and it can relocate Marines around the battlefield. It is the coolest shit. Basically, you pick up a Marine unit in your Thunderhawk, and you can like drop them off somewhere else on the battlefield. So not only can you deep strike units using the drop pods and deep striking Terminators, but you can also redeploy units around the battlefield using the Thunderhawk. Super badass. You have the Outrider motorcycles, you have the Gladiator Reaper tank, and the Repulsor Executioner. So those are two tanks. One of them is more anti-infantry, one of them is more anti-armor and whatnot. So super cool. I mean, I'm very pumped for this game. I just want to play multiplayer. I want to host some tournaments. You know what we're all about here, and it's going to be great. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that one, and thank you to Play On again for sending us over an early look at things. And yeah, that's going to be it, man. Very pumped. Hope to see you guys on the battlefield when this eventually comes out. I don't know when that's going to be, but hopefully not too long. And we'll see you guys around. Take care of yourselves. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions. What mechanics that I talked about did you like? Which ones sound a little bit suspicious to you? Maybe you're on the fence about it. And overall, I'd just love to hear what you guys are thinking. Also, it's an opportunity to potentially give feedback to some of the developers who may be watching this as well. So thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you around. Take care of yourselves. And that is going to be it for today.